Right now, there is a massive timber fire burning in the dense forests of the Oregon Cascades, and it's actually actively grounding firefighting helicopters hundreds of miles away in Idaho.
Yeah, which sounds crazy, I know.
It sounds like a total logistical impossibility, but that is the reality of a completely borderless disaster.
It really is.
So, welcome to today's deep dive. Today, we are pulling apart the Wildfire Report from the Daily Tech Reader, and this is dated August 7th, 2026.
Right, the newest data.
Exactly. And we want to show you how more than 400 active separate infernos have effectively merged. They've just morphed into a single continent-sized atmospheric and resource crisis across the American West.
It's massive. It's a massive interconnected puzzle.
It really is. And our mission for this deep dive isn't just to, plot out fire lines on a map for you. We are looking at the actual mechanics of a system that is just pushed way beyond its breaking point.
Yeah, we really need a complete shift in how we even conceptualize natural disasters right now.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the most staggering fact in this entire report is right at the top. The U.S. is currently at National Preparedness Level 5.
Right, Level 5.
Which, I want you to just imagine the sheer logistical weight of that for a second. Over 400 active fires, 6 different states under active fire weather alerts. What does Level 5 actually mean on the ground?
Well, so Level 5 is the absolute highest state of emergency the National Interagency Fire Center can declare, period.
Wow. There's no Level 6.
No Level 6.
Yeah.
Mechanically, what it means is that at least 80% of the nation's incident management teams and wildland firefighting personnel are fully committed.
80%.
At least. Usually more. The reserve pool is virtually empty. The specialized heavy aircraft, the complex incident commanders, the hotshot crews, they are deployed.
They're already out there in the dirt.
Exactly. We no longer have a surplus to respond to new threats. And that forces this really brutal triage system.
The hospital triage.
Sort of, yeah. Fires are prioritized not just by how big they are, but by the immediate threat to life and critical infrastructure.
See, I want to push back on the framing of this triage system right away, just looking at the data we have in this report.
Okay, sure.
Because California is currently tracking nearly 100 active fires.
Right.
Yeah, almost 100.
But Oregon is reporting roughly 50. Yet the report unambiguously designates Oregon, along with Washington, as the undisputed epicenter driving this whole Level 5 crisis.
Right. They are ground zero.
But why? If California has double the sheer number of ignitions, double the fires, why is the Pacific Northwest absorbing all of our national firefighting bandwidth?
Well, it comes down to fire behavior, honestly. Fire behavior, fuel density, and the complexity of the incidents. It's not just a raw ignition count.
So not all fires are created equal?
Exactly. The report specifies that the vast majority of California's 100 fires are they're currently small, they're relatively contained.
Meaning they haven't blown up into megafires yet. Right. Oregon, however, is managing several massive, highly complex incidents. The data shows them clustered in Wheeler, Harney, Malheur, and Baker counties.
Just huge swaths of land.
Massive. And Washington is seeing a very similar compounding crisis up in Okanogan County. These aren't just single point source fires.
Wow.
They are massive complexes burning through really deep, dense timber. They require hundreds of personnel per incident just to establish a basic perimeter.
Whereas a small grass fire in California might just take a few guys?
Right. A small grass fire might be handled by a single local engine strike team in an afternoon.
Okay, that makes sense. And the atmospheric data in the Pacific Northwest is painting a fairly terrifying picture of why those specific complexes are growing so fast.
Oh, the weather data is grim.
Yeah, the report outlines temperatures in the upper 80s to mid-90s across places like Spokane, Wenatchee, Yakima, and then Bend is seeing low 90s. Medford is hitting mid-90s.
Right, hot and dry.
But it's the relative humidity that really stands out here. The report shows inland humidity values plummeting into the teens.
Yeah.
And in a lot of areas of the Great Basin and Pacific Northwest, it's dropping into the single digits. It's basically turning the whole region into a giant continent-sized tinderbox.
A single-digit humidity is basically a firefighter's worst nightmare.
Walk us through that, like the actual physics of it. What does that atmospheric dryness do to a mature pine forest?
So when relative humidity drops below 10%, the atmosphere is essentially acting like a giant sponge. It aggressively sucks moisture out of literally everything on the ground.
Just pulling water straight out of the trees.
Yes. In wildland fire, we measure fuels by how long it takes them to respond to that ambient moisture. So you have 1 hour fuels, which is like dry grass.
Okay.
10-hour fuels are like twigs. all the way up to 1,000-hour fuels.
1,000-hour fuels.
Yeah, those are the massive, heavy tree trunks, the big logs. In a normal summer, those 1,000-hour fuels retain enough core moisture to, resist rapid combustion.
They're too damp inside to catch easily.
Exactly. But with prolonged single-digit humidity like the report outlines, that deep core moisture completely evaporates.
Wow.
The entire thermal mass of the forest is just primed to burn at peak intensity.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though, because the report overlays this severe dryness with two other critical weather conditions.
Right, the wind and the instability.
Exactly. Unstable air and breezy afternoon winds. If the landscape is already stripped of all its moisture, how does that specific combination alter what's happening on the ground?
What's fascinating here is that it fundamentally changes the thermodynamics of the fire.
Thermodynamics, like the actual physics of the heat.
Yes. Unstable air means there is very little atmospheric resistance to vertical movement. The heat from the fire can rise very rapidly, totally unobstructed.
Which forms those huge smoke plumes, right?
Right. It forms these massive convection columns. It acts exactly like a bellows on a blacksmith's forge.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The rising heat creates a vacuum at the surface, and that aggressively sucks in oxygen from the surrounding environment.
So the fire is actually breathing. It's pulling in its own oxygen.
Exactly. It feeds itself. And then you introduce those afternoon winds mentioned in the report.
Right.
Those winds push that intense oxygen-rich heat laterally across those bone-dry 1,000-hour fuels we just talked about.
So it just takes off.
It transitions from a surface burn right into a crown fire, just leaping from treetop to treetop. At that point, it starts generating its own localized weather systems, entirely independent of whatever the weatherman said it was going to do.
Which brings us right back to that level 5 resource drain. Because I imagine you can't just put a 20-person hand crew in front of a fire that is generating its own weather.
No, absolutely not. That's a death sentence. You have to back off. You rely on heavy aviation, and you basically try to steer it rather than stop it.
But this is where the geography of the crisis completely breaks down the traditional response model.
It really does.
Because these megafires in Oregon and Washington are generating immense convection columns, like you said. And all of that particulate matter, all that smoke, it has to go somewhere.
And it's going everywhere.
Exactly. The report outlines what is essentially an atmospheric river of smoke that is physically altering daily life across half the continent. It's like a massive secondhand smoke epidemic for half the continent.
That's a really good way to put it. We are seeing the topography of a smoke pipeline, and it's dictated entirely by prevailing westerly winds and high-pressure systems.
Right.
The sheer volume of biomass combusting in the Cascades is pumping thousands of tons of particulate matter into the upper atmosphere, and then it catches those upper-level currents and just flows directly eastward and southward.
Let's trace the route mapped out in the data for everyone listening, because the footprint here is staggering.
It really covered the whole map.
It does.
Yeah.
So Idaho is currently managing multiple large fires of its own in Washington and Idaho counties. Idaho Falls is seeing mid-80s and isolated storms.
Right.
But places like Boise, Lewiston, and the Clearwater Basin, they aren't just dealing with their own fire activity. They're being suffocated by heavy smoke intrusions pushing directly out of Oregon.
Right across the border.
And then that pipeline crosses the Rockies into Montana, which, by the way, has over 30 fires of its own.
Yeah, Montana's busy right now.
But the skies over Missoula and Helena are just choked with this combined mixture of Idaho and Oregon smoke.
And the flow just continues down the spine of the continent.
Yeah. The report tracks that same Montana and Idaho smoke pushing into the northern half of Wyoming. It's severely dropping visibility in Sheridan.
Right.
Nevada is catching the southern edge of the Oregon plumes, which is heavily impacting Elko. Utah is reporting haze in Ogden and Salt Lake City, drifting down from Idaho and Nevada.
It just doesn't stop.
It doesn't. Even Colorado is seeing the effects. Fort Collins is blanketed by smoke originating hundreds of miles away in Wyoming and Montana.
Yep.
And California, despite having lower large fire activity than the Northwest right now, is seeing an intense smoke canopy drifting south into Redding and Chico.
Yeah, and that settles right into the Central Valley and the Sierra foothills. It's a huge issue.
So I have to ask, because this massive canopy of smoke leads to the operational paralysis we touched on earlier.
Right, the aviation issue.
Yeah. If you are the incident commander in Idaho or Montana, and you're managing your own emerging large fires, how does a state fight its own fires when its skies are completely choked by its neighbor's smoke plumes?
Well, honestly, it completely neutralizes your aerial assets, and those are the backbone of modern initial attack strategies.
Because they just can't fly.
Right. Aviation operates under strict visual flight rules, or VFR.
Okay, VFR.
Yeah. To safely fly a tanker carrying, thousands of gallons of fire retardant into a really tight mountainous canyon, the pilot needs absolute visual clarity.
They need to see the ground?
They have to see the terrain, the fire line, and all the other aircraft in that airspace. When a heavy smoke canopy moves in from a neighboring state, it often brings an inversion layer.
What does that mean, an inversion layer?
It's basically a cap of warm air that traps the smoke close to the surface, so visibility drops to near zero.
Oh, wow. So you literally cannot see the ridges you are trying to drop retardant on.
Precisely zero visibility for targeting. You're completely blind. And furthermore, the turbine engines on these heavy helicopters and tankers, they are incredibly sensitive to particulate matter.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Like the engines choking on the ash?
Exactly. Inhaling dense ash can cause compressor stalls or total engine failure, so the air operations branch is just grounded.
That's terrifying.
You have a fire racing up a canyon in Idaho, and the helicopters sitting on the tarmac 10 miles away cannot launch, simply because a fire in Oregon has destroyed their airspace.
Man. So you are forced to rely entirely on ground crews in inaccessible terrain.
Right, which drastically increases the time it takes to contain the fire. That allows it to grow larger and demand even more resources from that already depleted Level 5 national pool.
It is just a compounding loop of resource scarcity. And airspace closure in one state artificially limits the suppression capabilities of a neighboring state, which basically guarantees their fires will burn longer and require more personnel.
It's a vicious cycle.
And speaking of personnel, we need to transition to the immediate future risks detailed in the report, because we have established the timber fires and the smoke pipeline.
Right, the current situation.
But the threat multipliers, outlined for the rest of the West, they focus on a very different type of fire behavior, specifically in the Great Basin and the High Plains.
Yeah, the report draws a really hard line between the deep-seated timber fires in the Cascades and the emerging threats in lighter fuel models.
Right. When we look at the alerts for Wyoming and Nevada, the terminology shifts entirely.
It does.
The report stresses that fire behavior remains elevated in Wyoming, specifically due to, quote, grass and brush fuels. And that's prompting active red flag warnings in Casper and Cheyenne.
Yep, grass and brush.
And in Nevada, which actually only has a handful of active fires right now, but critical danger levels, the warning is for rapid fire spread in open rangeland.
Especially with those afternoon winds near Winmucca and Reno.
Right. So what does this all mean? Like, I think you hear wildfire and you assume it's strictly a forest problem. Isn't a fire roaring through open Nevada rangeland fundamentally different and maybe much faster than a timber fire in the Cascades?
No, absolutely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the tactical shift for firefighters is entirely about the rate of spread.
How fast it moves.
Right. In a timber fire, the primary challenge is heat output and accessibility. The fire moves, but often at a pace where crews can methodically build containment lines.
Like with bulldozers and chainsaws.
Exactly, using bulldozers or hand tools ahead of the main front. But in grass, brush, and open rangeland, the fine dead fuel moisture can fluctuate wildly within a single hour based on humidity and wind.
Wow.
When you apply a 30-mile-per-hour sustained wind across totally flat Nevada rangeland, the fire doesn't just spread, it races.
It's purely wind-driven at that point.
It becomes a hydrodynamic fluid moving across the landscape. The rate of spread in fine fuels can exceed several miles per hour.
Miles per hour? That's faster than a person can walk through brush.
Way faster. From a tactical standpoint, a direct frontal attack on a fire like that is essentially a suicide mission.
Jeez.
Firefighters cannot outrun it, and engines cannot deploy fast enough to cut it off. The strategy has to shift to a flanking maneuver.
What does that look like?
You're attacking the sides of the fire and trying to pinch it off at the head, or you're dropping back miles ahead of the front to conduct massive burnout operations.
Like lighting fires ahead of it to remove the fuel before the main fire arrives.
Exactly. The Great Basin states might not have the heavy timber density of the Northwest, but they are sitting on an absolute powder keg of rapid spread potential. A brush fire there can cover tens of thousands of acres in a single operational period.
And the trigger for that powder keg is heavily forecasted in this report. The overarching weather threat, The thing threatening to break the NFC resource model completely is the lightning potential.
To dry lightning.
Yeah. It is mapped across almost the entire western United States right now.
The scale of the forecasted atmospheric instability is honestly unprecedented in this specific snapshot. We are looking at conditions ripe for dry thunderstorms.
Meaning storms that produce massive electrical activity, but where the rain just evaporates before it ever reaches the bone-dry ground.
Exactly, the Virga effect.
Right. And the geographic spread of this warning is staggering. The report outlines elevated lightning potential from unstable air across northern and central Washington, sweeping down into central Oregon.
Yeah.
It covers central Idaho, then pushes east across central and eastern Montana. Moving south, Grass Valley in California is facing elevated risks.
It's everywhere.
Eastern Arizona is flagged. And central and eastern New Mexico, a region already managing more than 30 active fires, with places like Santa Fe and Albuquerque dealing with hazy skies and dry winds. They're also staring down massive lightning potential.
Right.
We are looking at a continuous threat corridor stretching literally from the Canadian border down to Mexico.
And this is the exact scenario that shatters the mathematical models used for national resource sharing.
Because they can't be everywhere at once.
Exactly. The entire concept of the National Interagency Fire Center relies on staggered regional fire seasons. Historically, the Southwest burns in May and June, California peaks in late summer and fall, and the Northwest burns in August. So you rotate the hotshot crews and the aviation assets to wherever the geographic center of gravity is at the time.
But when you have a dry lightning event spanning 5 different geographic regions simultaneously, there is no rotation.
There's nowhere to borrow from. A widespread dry lightning event is akin to an aerial saturation bombing.
Wow.
You don't have a single defined front line to deploy resources against. You have hundreds, potentially thousands, of microscopic ignitions occurring simultaneously across multiple states.
And I imagine they aren't all easy to get to.
Not at all. Many of these strikes hit in terrain so rugged and remote that they can smolder undetected in a single dead tree for days.
Just waiting.
Just waiting until a wind event fans them into a 50-acre fire overnight.
And because we are already at preparedness level 5 due to the complexes in Oregon and Washington, those new lightning starts aren't getting the immediate overwhelming response they normally would.
No, the resources just aren't there.
The report mentions localized large fires already pulling resources in places we haven't even focused on yet. Utah has significant incidents in Millard and San Juan counties.
Right.
Colorado is fighting a large fire in Custer County. Arizona has fires impacting air quality around Flagstaff and Prescott.
Yeah, it's really widespread.
So if a dry lightning storm rolls through New Mexico tonight and sparks 50 new fires, the incident commanders there can't just call Idaho for backup.
No.
Because Idaho's air assets are grounded by Oregon's smoke, and their ground crews are fighting their own fires.
The interconnectedness becomes a liability rather than a safety net. The system is fundamentally reactive. It's designed to deploy overwhelming force to keep small fires small.
But when you have 400 active fires draining the system.
Exactly. And then a continental lightning event introduces 200 more ignitions into critically dry, high-wind environments.
What do you even do?
The strategy shifts entirely to point protection. You stop trying to put the fires out. You dedicate your remaining fractional resources solely to defending towns, critical watersheds, and power grids, while the landscape just burns around them.
Wow. It really forces a complete recalculation of how we exist in the modern American West.
It absolutely does.
Whether you are dealing with isolated dry storms in Billings, or you're navigating mid-90s heat and low humidity in St. George, or even just driving under an orange hazy sky during your commute in Albuquerque.
Yeah.
This source material demonstrates that weather and fire are no longer isolated events. An ignition in a remote Oregon canyon dictates the respiratory health of a resident in Colorado.
Right.
The barometric pressure over the Pacific Ocean determines if a helicopter in Idaho can safely turn on its rotors. Understanding this really complex mechanics of this interdependent web, that is the only way to grasp what it truly means when the nation hits preparedness level 5.
This raises an important question, though, about the physical infrastructure of our emergency response, because it was built for a climate baseline that may no longer exist.
Yeah.
As these fuel moistures continue to plummet and atmospheric instability becomes the norm rather than the exception, the concept of a regional fire season is just dissolving into a continuous, borderless state of triage.
Which leads us with a really critical paradigm shift for you to mull over. We just broke down how the massive fire activity in a single region, the Pacific Northwest, is enough to instantly exhaust our national firefighting logistics.
Right, just one region did this.
It grounded aviation across neighboring states and pumped an atmospheric river of ash across half the continent. The system is at its absolute limit, dealing with one primary epicenter.
Scarily holding on.
So how will our interstate resource sharing and our national emergency infrastructure function when the mathematics inevitably shift? What happens if 2 or 3 of these epicenters, say Oregon, California, and Arizona, all ignite with complex, plume-dominated megafires at the exact same time?
Yeah.
It really forces you to question if the concept of a local natural disaster is just a comforting myth we've outgrown. Because when you map out 400 active fires sharing a single depleted pool of resources under a continental smoke canopy, there is no meaningful boundary between a disaster zone and a safe zone. We're all breathing the same crisis.